Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creating Macros in Excel. My name is Rafael Tirado, and I'm going to be your instructor for the next 1 hour. So once again, welcome to Creating Macros in Excel. We have a very interesting class today. So here are the learning objectives. So in today's class, you will learn to save local and global macros. You're going to learn also how to assign a shortcut to a macro, how to add a macro to an existing toolbar, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the so-called Visual Basic Editor window. All right, so let's get into the first objective over here. But before I even go into that, just want to make sure that everybody's clear with the concept of what a macro is in Excel, right? So by definition, questions. Should we follow along in Excel? Yomar, my suggestion over here is if you have two monitors and then you want to watch me on one monitor and then follow along on the other monitor in Excel, that's fine. If you only have one monitor, then I would rather recommend that you just watch my demonstration today. The class is going to be recorded. Oh, let me make sure that we are recording the class. Yes, we are. So I'm going to put it on Transit University, and then you can then later on you can watch the recording. Maybe you want to do it on the tablet or the cell phone, and then at the same time you can practice in Excel. Okay, there is no data files in case that you decide to follow along with me, Yomar. All right. So, but once again, getting back to a definition of a macro in Excel. Okay, so by definition, a macro is an action or a set of actions that you can run as many times as you want. That probably doesn't tell you too much, right? But then I also added over here that when you create a macro, you are recording your mouse clicks and keystrokes. So when a macro is executed or run, the recorded mouse click and keystrokes are carried out automatically, saving you the time that it would take to manually perform the same operations. Okay, so that's just the definition that I put over there. The way that the way that I always describe a macro is if you have a task that you do in Excel, right? That you find that you have to repeat this task, right? Now and then, and instead of you always performing the same steps to accomplish this task, what you could do is you record yourself doing it once, and that recording is what will become a macro. So once you have the macro or saved, then at any time you can play the macro. And basically what's going to happen is that all the steps that you took when you were recording the macro, then they're going to be played back and basically save your time, right? So I always get the question like, Rafa, Isidore, I'm sorry, I can unmute you if you just let me know in the chat. I didn't want to unmute everyone. So just so we don't create too much noise background, but if you have a question, then I can unmute you, or you can just put the question in the chat and then I will share with everyone, okay? So again, as far as the macro, I was saying I always get the question, people asking me like, Rafa, I need to, every month, every week, I need to copy data from several spreadsheets on a workbook, and it's always just a process of copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. So it's always the same repetition. Can I put that into a macro? And then of course the answer will be yes. At some point you may have to tweak, you may have to make some changes to the original macro, because chances are that, one time you may have only 100 rows of data to copy, the next time you have 200, and so on. So you may have to do some adjustments, but that's the idea, that anything that could be repeated, or anything that is repeated that could be captured one time, then you can put it into a macro, and then you play the macro, and basically you save time. Okay, so here is the option. Here's the macro. We're gonna create today. So let's pretend that when I need to I'm sorry, Esmail, I'm looking for the option to unmute. Let me see if I will have, I believe I will have to, oh, the way, no, the way that we set it up, again, because this is the first time we're doing Excel, I will have to look for your name, and then I will have to allow you to talk. Okay. Oh, Raphael, you got that. Okay. All right. So getting back to the macros, the macro we're gonna create today is gonna go like this. So let's say that every time I create an Excel file, I need to add this information to my Excel file. So on cell A1, I'm required to type my first name, then my title, the department that I work for, my email, and my phone number. Okay. And this is something that I have to do every time that I create. Again, let's pretend that this is something I have to do every time I create an Excel file. Okay. So rather than me type in all this information on every file that I create, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record myself doing it once. Then with that, I will create a macro. And then every time that I need to put my information right there, I will just play the macro and the macro will add that information for me. Okay. So that's the idea. Now, when we are creating macros, okay, something I want you to know is you have two different type of macros you can record. You can record what's called a local and a global macro. All right. So local and global. What's the difference between one and another? So the local macro is saved with the Excel file that you're working on. So if you save your macro as a global macro, then the macro will be attached to that particular file. The advantage of that is that you can then email this file, you can send it to a colleague, and then that person can open the file and play the macro that you created. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage, if you think that's one, is that the file where you recorded the macro have to be open anytime you want to use that macro. Okay, so once again, because the macro is embedded into that file, then the file have to be present. It have to be open. If you don't have the file with you, then you cannot run the macro. But that's the story about the local macro, right? Now, the global macros, on the other hand, are macros that you saved on the computer. Could be, your work computer, the computer that you daily work on. So that macro will be available on any Excel file that you open on that particular computer. Okay, so that's the advantage. You don't need to have the other file open. You can just use it at any time with any file. Okay, of course, the disadvantage is you cannot distribute this macro to other members of your team. Okay, and and if you're thinking of, well, what if I start with a local, then can make it a global, or the other way around? So the answer is yes, you can start with a local macro, and then if you feel that it will be better to make it a global macro, then you can do that. And I'm going to show you today how to do that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that about the type of macros we're going to be creating. Another thing that I want to say is that when you create a macro, right, after you say the macro and then you want to run the macro, you can go and look at the list of all your macros. If you have, many of them, select the macro and click run, or you can associate that macro with a shortcut on your keyboard, right? So if I create a macro, and let's say like in the on the illustration over here, I associate that macro with the keys Control Shift and the letter N. Every time that I play that I hit those keys on the keyboard, then the macro will run. Of course, it have to be a global macro so you can run it on any file, or if it is a local macro, then the file that contains the macro have to be open before you can use the shortcut. Okay, but yes, you can assign shortcuts to make it easier for you to run your macro. All right, so the other thing that I want to say here is if you don't like to be remembering shortcuts, right? So you say one with Control Shift N and then Control Shift T, and then you have so many shortcuts to remember. Then instead of doing that, you could create your own toolbar right there on the menu, and then add the collection of macros that you have created, right? So you can even make different groups and then put inside those different groups, like you see over here, I created a personal and a business group. And then inside those groups, you can also put an icon that once you click on, then the macro will run. So you have different ways to run your macros. And the last thing that I want to say here is when you create a macro, you're gonna create a macro just by recording yourself, doing the clicking and the selection and all that. But behind the scenes, Excel is going to be recording what they call the Visual Basic equivalent to those clicking and keystrokes that you use on the keyboard, right? So this is something that you can go and explore, and as you get more familiar with the scripts and the code over here, then you can make simple changes to that code, and by making those changes, then you're going to be also changing the macro, the action on the macros. And I'll show you a very basic of this Visual Basic editor window. All right, so that's it for the introduction. So, but like you saw there's a lot of topics we're going to cover today, so let's get down to it. So let me open up Excel, and by the way, I'm using Excel 365, which is the version that we're using at the MTA right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new file over here, a new workbook. Okay, and then I'm gonna create the first macro. So remember, the first macro that I said I was gonna create is one in which I'm gonna type in my name, my title, the division I work for, just contact information. So every time I need it, the information will go there right into cell A1. So let me go back to Excel. All right. Now, how do you start the process of recording the macro? So you have an option over here. You can go over to the view menu. So I'm going over there, and all the way to the right over here, you have the macros option, right? So if I click on the drop down, you have the option over here to view if you already have any macros created. You also have the option to record macro. Okay, so that's one option you could use, right? Once again, from the view tab, you can use the macros group over here. Okay, but just so you know, there is also another tab that you can add right here to your menus. Okay, is a tab that is not going to show there by default. So I'm going to show you how to add it over here. So just simply go over to the file tab, and then you come all the way down to options right here. And once you go to options, then this window is going to open, and right here in the middle, you have options to customize the rhythm, which is what we call the the menus at the top of the window. So let me go there, and once I click this option, you're going to see that all the tabs that you see over here are already checked, meaning they are present in your Excel interface right now. But you notice that there is one that is not checked, okay? And this is the default. When you get Excel installed, you're not going to see the draw tab. You're not going to see the developer either. So developer is the one that I want to activate right now. So what I'm going to do is just click on developer. And if you're doing this with me, feel free to also add the draw tab. And once you make those changes, you click OK. All right. So now right here on my menus, you see now draw right there, but you also see developer. Okay. And developer is the one that I'm interested in. Why? Because developer has this group over here. It's called the code group. And then again, you have the option to record the macro. You have the option to check your macros, but then you have these relative references was also on the view menu. But you have another option over here called macro security, and then you have also the Visual Basic. Okay, so I'm going to be touching a little bit on each one of those options. But the one that I'm going to start with is, of course, the record macro, because that's what I go to when I want to initiate the process of creating a macro, the process of recording my actions, right? So I'm going to click on record macro, all right? And then Excel wants me to name the macro that I'm going to create. So any name will be fine over here. No spaces in between the names. So I'm going to call this my name. Okay. So I couldn't call it space name because they don't like spaces in between. So I have to be all together, or you can also use the underscore. But let me just go with my name. And now for the shortcut, I could use the letter N as in name and then just put N right there. But you probably want to use not just control, but a combination of control and shift. Why? Because remember, control N is an option that is already assigned to a function in Excel. You guys know what control N is used for? Let me just pause there for a minute. And if you can put in the chat, what do we use control N in Microsoft Excel? Salim, Yomar, very good. Yes, you get a new file. You get a new workbook, okay? Because remember, technically, we shouldn't say a new sheet or worksheet because the sheets and worksheets are the ones at the bottom, the tabs, but a new workbook or a new file. But yes, you're good with that. So I don't want this shortcut over here to interfere with creating a new file. So what I'm going to do is before I hit the letter N, I'm going to hold the shift key down on the keyboard, and then I'm going to press the letter N. So my keyboard, my shortcut now becomes Control Shift N, as you see right there. Okay. So that's second option over here. So you start with the name. I mean, it's not mandatory that you assign the shortcut, but you will benefit from having a shortcut because, of course, you're going to run your macro faster. Now, where do you want to store these macros? So that's what I was referring to before. Is it going to be a local macro that is going to be attached to a file, or is it going to be a global macro that is going to attach to this computer that I'm using right now? Okay, so I'm going to start first with a local. So for local, I have two options over here. I can have Excel create a new workbook, or I can have Excel save it right here on the workbook that is open right now. So I'm going to go with the second option over here, this workbook. All right. And well, let me make sure is this workbook. And then, of course, if I can put a description over here if I want to. So let me see. Let me put over here my contact information. All right. And then I'm going to click OK. And careful now, because once I click OK, then I started the recording process. Okay. So anything that I click on, anything that I type, any key that I hit on the keyboard is going to be part of the macro that I'm creating right now. And also remember the record button over here. Now it's switched to stop recording. Okay, so now I know that I'm recording my macro right now, and that's what I will go to when I'm done doing or recording my steps. So step number one, I'm going to go and click on cell A1, and then I'm going to type in my name. So here I go, Rafael A. Tirado, and I'm going to hit the enter key, and that's going to move me down to cell A2. So on cell A2, I'm going to type my, what is it that I said? Oh, my title. So computer specialist, and I'm stuck with level 3. If anybody's looking for a level 4, please email me. And in the email that you're going to send your request to will be Rafael Tirado at nyct.com. And I said that I'm going to put also my department over here. So now after the transformation, I ended up on HQ, and we are people department. All right, so I'm just going to put that information there. And then I'm going to go down to adding my phone number, 646-464. That's my cell phone number. No, I don't want to put that there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So anyways, you got the idea, right? So good question. If we had something already typed, will it become part of the macro? No. If you had something already, let's say on cell A1, and then you type over, then whatever you type over cell A1 will become part of the macro. Yes, but because that information was there before you mark, then it won't become part of the macro. Okay, good question. All right, that's it. So this is all I needed to record, right? Me typing my name, my contact information. So now that I'm finished with this, I can stop recording. So don't forget to stop recording. This is the first mistake we make when we start recording macros, right? We forget to stop recording, then anything else that you keep doing on your file will be part of that macro. So I'm gonna make sure that I click on stop recording. I can click there, or all the way down here, there is also a stop button that I can use to stop my recording. So let me go up and stop, and that's it. So that's the macro we are going to create. So we did it in 1 hour and 23 minutes. So class is over now. No, just kidding. There is so much more to do with macros. So, but let's get to it now. So let's first try it, right? So I'm gonna delete this, and I'm gonna make sure that the macro is working. So how do I test the macro? I'm going to use the shortcut that I assigned, which was Control Shift and the letter N, and you see it works, right? So you see right there what I needed to put on those particular cells, right? My contact information. So from now on, anytime that I need to have that information there, I do Control Shift N, and I won't have to retype it, and that will save me time. Okay. Now remember, I purposely saved this macro with this file, right? So that means if I close this file, the macro is not going to be available to me. So once again, I did it. I did with the purpose of then later on showing you how to make this macro a global macro, so it will be available to any file that I open on this computer. Okay, but what I also want to say now is once you have this macro already created, right? So if you forget to assign a shortcut to it, you can go over here to the macros collection. Okay, and then the macro will be right here, my name. Okay, and this is the macro that we just created. These are macros. There are two other macros over here. Okay, this one that is called delete me is one that I just created when I was practicing for the class, and I obviously forgot to delete it. I'm going to show you how to delete this macro. Okay, and this is another macro I did for someone I was helping a couple of weeks ago. But the fact that you see the word personal over here, that indicates that this is a global macro. It's a macro that is, saved on this computer. The one that we just created, my name is right here. And if I wanted to run it, then another way that I have to run it is to click on the run button. But I open this window so I can show you that if you go to options, let me just go there. If you go to options, then you can reassign a different shortcut. Or if you forget to create a shortcut, then you can go and change it. And let me hear one question. I press Control Z to undo, and it closes the Excel workbook. Is it because of the macro? Is it that you let me see who Yomar, do you use Control Z as the shortcut for your macro? I use and it closes the Excel workbook. No, it should have nothing to do with the macro. Control Z is just to undo Yomar, as you have it clear. So I will look into, let me just cancel over here and let me cancel. I will look into the undo list over here and see why somehow the closing of the file was the last action that was added to the undo collection. But no, it have nothing to do with the macro. Mhm. All right. So moving on over here, I was describing the macros window as a way to go and check on the macros you already created, and also as a way to run your macro if you forgot to assign the shortcut. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to say is once you go over to the macros window and then you pick any one of these macros over here, you can click on the edit button that you see over here. And once you click edit, what's going to happen is now Excel is going to take you over to the so-called Visual Basic Editor window. Okay, so this is where all the magic happens. So like you are recording your keystrokes and your mouse click as part of the macro, but then Excel is writing the equivalent of those mouse clicking and keyboard strokes in Visual Basic language. Okay, and it's not so difficult to uh, sometimes to interpret the scripts that you see over here. So even without knowing Visual Basic, you know that the first step over here refers to just when I clicked on cell A1 to make a selection, right? And then when I type in my name, then this is how Visual Basic recorded that action. All right. And I have a question in the chat. How to start recording? Isidore, let me go back to Excel for 1 second. And the process to start recording is right here, record macro, okay? And we are on the developer tab. And if you came late to the class, I just went through the developer tab, how to place the developer in there. And I said that you need to go over to the file menu. You need to go to options, almost all the way down. And right here in the middle where you see customized rhythm, then you have to come right here and check the developer tab. Okay, so once you have the developer tab, then you can go there and then just simply click on record macro. All right, excellent. All right, so getting back to Visual Basic. So again, I'm going to go to macros. I'm going to select the macro and I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to be right here on the Visual Basic window. Okay. Can you repeat how you get the edit option? Elizabeth, I think you referred to when I go to macros and I pick the name, then I go, oh, sorry, I just repeated that. So yeah, I already did. So, all right. My name edit. So we're here on the Visual Basic editor window. Now, what I like to do here is I like to make some changes, very simple changes. Like you notice over here when I type in my name, I just use my middle initial. What if I want to spell out my middle name as I just did there, right? So I switch that A to an angel, my middle name. And what if the reference to the cell, right? I don't want this information to appear on column A. I rather wanted it to appear on column C, right? So all I need to do is just change the reference for each one of these cell reference over here. So every time I see in the macro A for A1, A2. So how did it go? Oh, look at this. Remember I went to my email before I put my title. So there is an A4 selection here before selecting A3. So that's okay. Let me just change that to AC and also AC. It could be lowercase, uppercase, not a big deal. Um, we'll get to that, Rafael. What if I want the information wherever I click? That's a very important question. I will address that question in a few minutes, okay? But let me just make the changes over here. So keep in mind, I made two changes, right? So I changed the column reference to column A to column C, and I also spelled out my middle name. So if I get back to Excel now, which I can do by going over to this icon over here. So I'm going to go back to Excel. I'm going to delete what I have right there. And then I'm going to use my combination again, Control Shift N. And look at this. So now my information goes in column C. right? And not because I was there. I could have been anywhere, like say right here on M, and I do Control Shift and the data goes to C because that's what's registered on the Visual Basic code. You can also see that my middle name is now spelled over here instead of the abbreviation. So that's, but that was a very, very simple change in Visual Basic. You don't have to know Visual Basic to record macro because you're just going to be recording your actions, but down the road it will pay off to learn a little bit of this amazing programming language. All right, so I'm going to stop right there with this macro. But what I want to do now is, remember, I created this macro as a local macro. So as a local macro means I need to save this file. So I'm going to go over to the save icon, and I'm going to change that name. So let's call this my information. All right, so that's good for the file name. I don't want to save this on the cloud, although that's fine, but I wanna save it on my hard drive. So I'm gonna go to more options, and then I'm gonna switch over here, double click on this PC, and I'm gonna pick the document folder. Okay, so here is where I want this file to be saved. Okay, but one thing that I want to share with you, because we're using Excel 365. Okay, and this is something that I learned the last time that I taught this class. On 365, Excel will automatically adjust the data type for this document. Okay, so right here we say save as type. You notice that Excel pick Excel macro enable workbook. This is not the default for Excel files, right? So when you create an Excel file, isn't it that Excel automatically defaults to Excel workbook, right? And it still does it on 2016, 2013, even if you're creating a macro, right? So that used to be a problem with those versions because sometimes you forget to change the type. And then if you try to save a file that contains macro as an Excel workbook, watch me over here as I click save, then I will get this prompt saying, hey, the file that you're saving has some macro functions in it. If you save it as it is, you click yes and save it as a workbook, you won't be able to run those macros. So please say no over here and then go and change to the appropriate data type, which is Excel macro enabled workbook. Okay, so that's what's going to happen to you if you're running 2016 Excel or 2013 or even 2019. But with 365, they automatically change the data type over here. So you have no problem. All you need to do here is just click save. The name is there, my info, and it's saved on the document folder. So let me go ahead and save it. And now the name is showing right there at the top. Okay. Is that no? It's not because it's local or global. No. Oh, you mark. It's just because we're using 365. So 365 is smart enough to notice that there is some code on the file and then suggest that you use the appropriate data type. I mean, it's not a big deal because, like I said, you can always select the appropriate data type. If you forget, then they are going to remind you. But no, it's just because we're using 365. Okay. All right. So I got the file now. The file is saved. It contains my macro. Let me even delete this here, save it again. And what I want to do now is I want to close the file. I want to close it, and I'm going to open a new file. I'm going to go Control N. Remember, you told me Control N is a new file. Now, in the new file, if I'm looking for my name macro, if I go to developers and I look at my macros, I'm not going to find it. So remember, it was here. I'm not going to find it. Why am I not finding the macro that I just created? Because I closed the file. So if the file is closed, then the macro will not be available for us to use. Even if I use, what was that, Control Shift N, it's not doing anything. It's not doing anything because the file is closed. Okay. Now, when you receive, or if you send this file to a colleague because you want that person to use the macro, see, you create a macro probably for a different purpose, right? And then you want that person to use the macro, you send the file. When that person opens the file, let me close this one first. Let me close this and open the file that we just saved. That's my information. So watch what happens when you open a file that contains a macro. Let me just click there. You're always going to get this notice, okay? And you got to be very careful when you attempt to open a file that has macros or Visual Basic Code in it, okay? You're going to get this message over here saying, you know, Microsoft Office identify a potential security concern. It is not possible to determine that this content came from a trustworthy source and all that. So they give you the option to either enable or disable macros, okay? I suggest that when you get a file that contains macro, you first open the file with this disable option, okay? Even if you trust the person that sends you the file, right? Get used to first open it disabling macros. So, and I'm going to tell you why. So if I click on disable macros, right, the file's still going to open, right? The macro is still going to show there. So if I go to developers and I click on macro, then the file is there, my name, right? Now the name of the file precedes the name of the macro, but this is the macro that that we created. I cannot run the macro. If I click run, it's going to tell me, no, you cannot run it because you disabled the macro, which is what I'm expecting, right? But why do I want to disable the macro? Because I want to go to the Visual Basic window, and I want to see what code is present on that file. Okay, and how do I do that? You got two options over here. I can go to macros, select the macro, and then you notice that the edit option is not available now because you disabled the macro, but you can still go into the step into. So that's one way. If you do a step into, then, oh, my bad. I thought that the step into was going to let me go there. Okay, no, it says because you disable, you cannot see the code, but you can go straight to Visual Basic, and that's why I wanted to enable this additional developer option here. You can go to Visual Basic. All right, and now in the Visual Basic window, you're going to see right here. You're going to see right now. You're going to see two files. The file that we just created. And then you are also going to see another file over here called personal. Okay, so this file, the personal file, this is a hidden file. This is a file that is present in Excel. You don't get to see it because it's hidden, right? But it opens every time you open Excel. And if you have created any global macros, this is the place where you're going to go and find those macros, right? So remember I told you I had a macro. Let me go back to Excel for a minute. Remember I said there is a macro that I created when I was practicing for the class and I forgot to delete it, right? The delete me macro. So now when I go to Visual Basic, and I situate myself right here on the personal macro workbook, I can start double clicking on these modules over here, and you're going to see that I will find my macro. So you may have several modules over here. All you need to do is just double click to explore. So on module number 1, I have the daily report. That's a macro that I told you I created when I was helping someone. If I double click on my macros, this is the delete me macro that I forgot to delete. Okay, so how do I get rid of this macro? I just simply select the from the beginning of what's called a subroutine all the way to what it says end sub for subroutine. So if I do this, press delete, then I still have the module, but I don't have any macro in it. Okay. Do I need to remove the module? Up to you. If you want, you can do a right click and then you have the option over here to remove the module, or you can leave it there in case you're going to be creating more global macros later on. So I'm going to leave it as it is, right? But as far as the file that you open with the disable macros, the my information, you want to go on that file and you want to double click on the modules that relate to this file, okay? The my information file. Why? Because when you double click on that module, then it's going to reveal the macro that is disabled right now, so you can explore the code within the macro, and then you can decide if you want to reopen the file and now enable the code. Okay, if you're unsure about the coding that you see right here, then don't even bother. Okay, because you may expose yourself to running a code that may be a malicious code that is going to do something bad on your computer, right? And you may be thinking, yeah, but the macro is not going to run unless I do Control Shift N, and that is true, right? Even if you enable the macro, but you never press the shortcut key, or you never go and click on run, then this macro is not going to run. But guess what? There are some other modules where people can put code that will automatically run when you start your computer. Okay, and I can show you quickly over here. We had the time, so I'm gonna go over to and I got a question over here. Alexandra say, I do not have the personal XLSP. And the reason for that, Alexandra, is because you don't have any global macro created on your computer yet. So, but as soon as you create a global macro, then this file will show up right here on the Visual Basic Code. All right. So I was saying, not only you have to explore this module over here, but you have to also go to these two other modules over here. So you see where it says sheet 1, you have to double click, not just one click, but you have to double click to see if there is any code related to spreadsheet number 1, or even better, or even worse, this workbook over here, because this is where people can hide that malicious code that I'm telling you about, right? So anyone can come to this workbook, pull down the list of objects over here, and as I do that, you see how Excel created a subroutine or a macro for the workbook, for the workbook object for the open event. Okay, so what this means over here is that any code that is placed in between these lines right there is going to run automatically as soon as this workbook open, if you enable those macros. Okay, so let me put something silly over here, just a message box, which is a VBA command that says your PC is infected. All right. Now, when is this going to run? Faye and Strap, Rafa, why my macro is not appearing in Visual Basic? It should. It should, Faye. And I'll give you a quick call after the class and see why it doesn't show, but it should. Yep. All right. So I give you a team's call. I was saying, if I put this here, right, and I go back to Excel, right? Oh, unless you because you have to do a double click, Faye, and don't just click, but do a double click. If you go to on your file, right, on the file name, look for module 1, and once you get a module 1, that's where you have to do a double click. So that will reveal your macro. So give it a try and see if that works. Okay. And Faye Ann is asking me that her macro was shown before and now it doesn't. So remember, it's not just one click, it's a double click, right? But let me go back to this workbook module, again, double clicking, and see what I just put here, right? A message that is going to show whenever this file opens, right? Now, let me go back to Excel. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save and I'm going to close. And after I close, I'm going to open the file again. File open. I'm going to open it. And this time I'm going to enable macros. As soon as I enable macros, look at this, your PC is infected. Okay, we know it's not, it's just a message that I put, but you get my point, right? So anybody could have put malicious code right there on the open event for the workbook module. right? So you don't want that to happen. That's the reason why you always want to prevent that situation by your disabling macros on any file that has a macro attached to it. So let me go back to Visual Basic quickly and clean this up. I want to see this every time that I open the file, and let's continue in here. All right. So now someone was asking me also, Raphael was saying, what if I want my information to show anywhere or what I'm, what I the in the cell that I'm at when I'm running macro. So I don't want it to go always to either A1 or C1. Can you do that? Of course, yes. And you can do it two different ways. But before I do that, also let me go back to Visual Basic. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to module one, which is where I have the macro that we created. And I'm going to do a copy. I'm going to select this, right click, copy. And I'm going to copy this macro from my file, from my local file to the global personal file. So if I go to personal and I double click either, I can put this on module one at the very end of module one, or I can put it on my macros module. Or if I want to, organize my macros even more, at any time I can go to insert and then create my own module. So now I have module one, two, and my macros. So you can drop your macros anywhere you want. So let me just leave it right here on my macros, and I'm going to paste it. So my name, right? The macro that I created on my information file now is part of my computer because I placed it on the personal macro workbook. Okay, so you guys get that, right? So now to answer your question, Raphael, how do I make sure that the data goes on the cell that I'm at when I'm running the macro? So you can do it two ways. I'm going to show you how to do it just by recording the steps, so there is no need for Visual Basic, right? But down the road, once you get a little bit more familiar with VBA code, then you're going to say, well, if I'm not going to rely on a specific range, so why don't I just delete this line, and then I let my name go into the active cell. Okay, so that will be good for my name. So my name is now not going to go to C1, just going to go to the active cell. But computer specialist, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be on the active cell, but the active cell will be C2 because this line over here will make C2 the active cell. So instead of making C2 the active cell, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell VBA to change the active cell to offset the location of the active cell one row down. So if my active cell is, let's say, A10, by writing this line over here, once again, if my active cell at any time is A10, by adding this line of information over here, active cell offset 1 for the row, 0 for the column, then my active cell will become then A11, right? And then on A11, that is where my computer specialist title will go, okay? So as simple as that. And I will do the same for the other entries, but just because of the amount of time that we have left, I'm just going to do it twice. I'm going to do it for the, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that I want to select this active cell. So let me just do it for my name and for my title, and even for the email. So, because you're going to send me an email if you're looking for a computer specialist level 4. So I want to make sure you have that in there. All right, so let me just do it for 3 lines over here, and then I'm going to delete from here down. All right, so once again, I did modify the code using Visual Basic, okay? And now what's going to happen is my name, my title, and my email will be placed wherever I'm at. So if I'm right here on I4 and I do Control Shift N, that's oops, oh, sorry. See what happened over here? I'm still running the Visual Basic code on my information file. So make sure that I close this file, okay? So I don't have a conflict there with the shortcut. So let me close the file that had the original macro. Let me open a new one now. And because I put the macro on the global normal template file, then I should be able to go to developer. Oh, but let me place myself in another cell. Let me go to developer, macros, and I pick my name and I run it. And then you see that the data was entered at this location and not at cell C1. Okay. One thing to add though is when you copy and paste a macro from one place to another, you don't copy the shortcut, right? So if I go back to macros and then you look at my name right here, I will have to go to options and I will have to reassign the shortcut if I want to use the same one. If let's say I want to use over here Shift R as in Raphael, so now Control Shift R becomes the shortcut for my macro. And then if I run it from here, that's where my name goes. And if I run it from there, that's where my name goes. Okay. But this is just because I changed the Visual Basic code, right? And you probably don't want to have to bother with that. Okay. So I will show you another option over here. So we're going to go back to developer. We're going to record a new macro, but this time around, we're going to use what's called relative references, okay? Which is the opposite to what we did before. So when you're not using relative references, then you're using absolute references, right? Absolute reference mean if I type my name on A1, my title on A2, my phone number on A3, that's where the data is going to go back when you run your macro. But when you do with relative references, as we're going to do now, just watch over here. Let's create another macro. And let's call this my name too. And let's use a different shortcut over here. Let's say Control Shift M. And I'm going to save it on the personal macro workbook. And then I'm going to click OK. All right. So again, we're going to do a similar macro, but because we're using relative references now, my name is going to go right here. Let me just use the name. Let me use the abbreviation over here for the title. And let me just put the phone number 718-4567. And that's it. Let's say this is what I need to record. I'm going to stop recording. Okay. And now I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go to another cell right here, and I'm going to do Control Shift M, and that's where my name goes. Or if I'm on A7, Control Shift M, that's where my name goes. Why? Because I'm using relative references as opposed to absolute reference. Does this have to happen in a new workbook? No, you can do it on the same workbook you were using before. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay, Yomar. All right. So, but the difference that I want you to see now, Yomar, is when you go to Visual Basic, okay? If you wrote it on the same workbook, then you're gonna have to double click for the modules of that workbook. If you wrote it on the personal macro workbook, then you notice that in my particular case, and this is the reason why you may end up with so many modules over here. Okay, every time you close a file and you open a new one and you create a new macro, then Excel tends to create new modules for those macros. So if I'm looking for this particular macro that I just created now, maybe right there on module number 3, right? So if I double click, so you see how similar this macro is as far as the code that refers to active cell offset, right? So this is the script that I included on the original macro, and this is how Excel refers to when you're using relative references, right? So you're not going to see any A1, A2, C1, C2, C3 over here. They will always refer to the active cell when you're using relative references. So the code changes a little bit in there, but that's all it is. Okay. So I hope that answered your question, Raphael. And the other thing that I'm going to do now is, like I said, if you don't like to be remembering shortcuts, right? And you get into creating, you get into, oh, you're very welcome, Rafael. So, but you get into the habit of creating macros, right? And you want a quick way to run them. So what you could do is, let's go back to the file and the options box over here when that we started with. Let's go back to customize rhythm. And what you could do is you can create your own tab in here and then add your own macros over there. Okay. Now I'm gonna say I'm gonna click on new. So what I'm gonna do here, oh wait, there is a question, Rafael. My last cell says 2-3 instead of 1-1. What did I do different? You may have clicked on let me see, so 2-3 instead of 1-0. Let me just, Elizabeth, my last cell says 2-3 instead of 1-0. Until I get that question, let me, because I was thinking that maybe it's something that you, oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Oh, okay. It means that when you were creating that macro with the mouse, Elizabeth, instead of hitting the enter key when you type your name, you took the mouse and what is it? 2-3. So 2, that means you went 2 columns, I'm sorry, 2 rows down and 3 columns to the right. So you may have clicked on a cell that was 2 columns, I'm sorry, 2 rows down from the active cell and 3 columns to the right of the active cell. So that's what that 2-3 means over there. Go ahead and change it. Go ahead and change it to 1-2, and then Excel will know that you have to offset the active cell 1 row down and remain in the same column. So in other words, your title may end up on a location like this when you run that macro, right? Because it's going to be 2 down, 3 to the right. Okay. But you just go ahead and change it and you should be okay. All right. So I was saying, if you go to file options, right, you can modify your rhythm over here just by adding a new tab. So I'm going to click on add new tab, and you see a new tab was created here, and there is also a new group in it. So I'm going to have at least 2 groups. Okay. And all I need to do now is rename those. So I'm going to go to new tab, rename. This is going to be my macros. And then I'm going to have 2 groups. Let's say group number 1, I'm going to rename it as personal group. And every macro that is sort of like a personal type of macro, I will put it there. And anyone that is work related, I will put it in the other group. Okay. So now I have 2 groups over here. Now, how do I put the macros in there? What I need to do now is I need to switch back here and then take a look at the macros. I'm sorry, I went to all commands. So let me just select macros. So these are the 3 macros that I have on my computer right now. So I'm going to add the daily report that, again, I created for someone before. I'm going to add it on the personal group, and the work related, I'm going to click there and I'm going to add my name and my name too. Okay. And all you need to do now is just rename these macros so they make more sense. So this was just the daily report. And now I can put icons over there as well. And so this is my name. Let me rename my name. And I remember this as the absolute reference, my name. And the other one is going to be the relative reference, my name. Okay. And then I'm also going to change the icon over here. Okay. I can do that for this too. And that's it. So now I have a new tab. It's called my macros. When I click OK over here, I look at the I look at the rhythm over here. So this is my macros tab. And within this tab, I have the personal group, I have the work related, and if I need to run those macros, all I need to do is just go and click on the icon and the macro will run. So let me just do one here, my name, and let me do the other one, and there you have it. Okay, so you have those macros now assigned to a tab right here on the rhythm, and that will make it easier for you to run macros, so you don't have to remember those shortcuts. All right, and oh wow, look at the time, 2:02. So yeah, I know it was a lot for one day, but I just want to make sure I cover the saving of the local and the global, assigning keyboards and shortcuts, and I even had the time to squeeze this in, how to add a macro to an existing toolbar. And we did also some exploration of the VBE window, Visual Basic Editor window. Wow. Are you going to be teaching the 25 as well? Let me see. I left some references over here, and that's my class too, Yamar. Yeah. So I'm gonna put this PowerPoint presentation online on the Transit University site. You can also go there to get our upcoming classes. But now that we are restructuring the site, I just realized that you have to do a lot of digging over here to get to our classes. So I created a file that you can also access. I'm gonna leave the shortcut over here, and it also lists our classes, and you can click there to register. So by the way, let me just even put this on the chat. So in case you want to have a quick reference to it. So let me just get the link, and I'm going to put it on the chat for everyone to go there if you want to. And last but not least, we need your input right here. So if you can, oh Jesus, let me swap. All right. And if you can point your cell phones to the QR code. Oh, gee, I thought you could see it without signing in. I'm sorry, Salman. If you have a Google account, that you can use to sign in, see, is that an option to see it without having to log in? Salma, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I will make sure that I change that. If you guys have a Google account and just want to put in to sign in, it's just to see the file. Okay, so I'm gonna have to work on that, Elizabeth. Give me a few minutes, and just save the shortcut somewhere, and in a few minutes, I will I will be able to change the access over there for everyone. The feedback survey, again, you can do it with the cell phone, or let me just copy the link and put it in the chat. I know you're gonna have to sign in for this, but we really appreciate your feedback over here. So if you take a few seconds over here and just do the survey for us, we'll appreciate it. And other than that, then could you send the link through email? Yes, yes. I'm gonna follow up since I got your emails. See only the tab, but not the groups within. Benu Rapari, I only see the tab and not the group within. Okay, let me go back. This is a question. I know it's past 2 o'clock right now, so if you need to disconnect, that's fine. But let me see if I can answer. Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, let me see if I can answer this question, Vanu. If you see the tab but not the groups, okay? So here's what I want you to do. Go back to options. Go back to options and select the tab Okay, expand it if you need to. So if you don't see groups over here, okay, make sure that you go and add new groups. Okay, very welcome, Dante. So click on new groups, and that should add groups right here under the my macros. All right, Wilson. So let me know if that fixed your problem. Then, or the other thing that could happen is that you have the groups, but you didn't add the macros, right? So it's not only having the groups. Oh, okay, all right. So do you have? I know you have the two group, but do you have any macros under the group? So that's probably what's missing, right? So go to one of the groups, and then make sure you switch up here. You switch to macros. Thank you, Elizabeth. And pick your macro and then click add Venu. And that should, okay, beautiful. All right. I'm glad you get it. All right. All right, everyone. So I'm gonna end it now, and hope to see you. I hope to see you next week. All right. Yes. Yes. That's what it was. Venu. All right. So let me stop right here. Save. You are very welcome, everyone. Let me just end the class. And once again, I'll see you next time.